I have to say, on my watch, it does not look. Oh, yes, I think it probably is 1 o'clock now. Okay, so for those of you who are joining now, welcome. It's lovely to have you joining us all. It's great to see how many people are enjoying these conversations with me. And we have some wonderful people that I talk to. And today for me is very special because I can never remember how long, Paul, but it's been some long time since I met you, quite a few years. And it's been a fantastic journey that we've been on over the years together. Just so that you all know, Paul, I first met him when he was with Sage. He'll probably tell you a little bit about it when he was CEO. And his absolute passion and commitment for leadership has blown my socks off. It's been inspirational for me. There's no question I've learned as much from him as he ever has from me. And so I'm really, really thrilled to have Paul joining me today. So, Paul, why don't I hand over to you and kick off with saying, why don't you give everybody a little bit of an insight into you and maybe your journey? Because there's an awful lot you could share with us, I know.
Well, thank you, Penny, and thank you for that introduction. So I suppose I should start off with where I come from, which is actually Newcastle upon Tyne. So nobody ever believes me when I say that, by the way. I have to produce my passport and justify it on the basis of the accent not really reflecting where I come from. But I'm very proud to come from the Northeast. But my family, at a very early age, so before I'd had a chance to adopt the accent, emigrated to Africa. And I was brought up actually in Southern Africa, which is relevant for reasons that we'll come on to, because I had a wonderful childhood in Africa, just a absolutely fantastic place. But I'm old enough to have got caught up in the civil war that took place in a country called Rhodesia, now called Zimbabwe. And it was a war that should never have been fought. I mean, it was a mad, stupid, daft war. Mad because there should have been intelligent discussion and negotiation and settlement, recognizing that clearly the majority Black population was going to and should have the right to run their own country and not be subject to the colonial rule of Britain, or as became the case, the slightly rebellious rule of Ian Smith and the regime that he introduced. But I was caught up in the middle of it, and was brought into the army in order to defend, frankly, the indefensible, but anyway, to defend the country against insurgent attacks from all of the borders around the country. And so unwittingly, at the age of 18, don't tell anybody, but I was really a pretty poor soldier. I got caught up in this war, and it was ugly. It was horrible, as all wars are. And one thing it taught me, above all else, actually, was the power of, it's a terrible word, but the power of teamship. You learnt, and I think it's true of anybody who's served in any military environment, and it's certainly true in the business world, and we'll come on to that, no doubt. But you learn that you have to deploy your strengths to make the team work better. But equally, you need to be extraordinarily mindful and grateful for the strengths of others who can complement where you're weak. And if you don't get that right, then you run the risk of your team not surviving, actually, in extremis. So that interdependence of people working together, diverse, very different views sometimes, disagreeing robustly from time to time, sharing information, but above all else, sharing values, looking after each other, having each other's backs, having a degree of confidence in where the team is headed. And the bit that was most difficult of all for us was actually believing in what we were doing, because increasingly as the war went on, we became more politically aware as we went from 18 into 19, and we started to realize that the whole thing was crackers. which is a very dangerous thing for a soldier to be starting to do, by the way, or any team that starts to lose belief in the purpose of what they're about is not going to perform that well. So that was time for me to get out. And fortunately, I did get out of that war after about 2 years, and then came to the UK. I went to university here. I trained as a chartered accountant with Price Waterhouse. I keep that bit of my history very quiet. And then went into merchant banking. Goodness me, that was a long time ago. And then finally found my métier getting into commerce with a business called Interbrand, which no one on the call will have heard of, but it was at the time a very small but pioneering agency in the field of brands and branding. So I was part of the team, for example, that created the Mondeo for Ford. So there you are. There's something you didn't know.
No, I didn't.
And it was all a bit embarrassing, actually, because the week that the Mondeo was launched to the world, there was a double page spread in Autocar Weekly. And on that double page spread, there was a picture of me in the middle. And underneath it said Stobart, Mondeo man. After which I've never really got over that one, and been teased mercilessly ever since. But it was a wonderful time Interbrand. It was full of bright, creative, very different people who had a zest for life and an energy for business. It was wonderful to be part of that. So I was there for 8 or 9 years, and then we sold the business, did an earn out, and I then left to join my favorite client. My favorite client was a business called Sage, which you referenced right at the beginning, a business based back in the Northeast. So it took me 40 years, but I got back to Newcastle eventually, and had 16 years at Sage. It was a wonderful time. I think when I started at Sage as part of the executive team there, we were about 100 million in revenue, and we grew it to 1.3 billion over the next 15 years through a lot of organic growth, but a lot of acquisitions, as Sage established itself as a real global player in its segment. And I learned an awful lot then. Of course, that was during that time when I met a certain Penny Ferguson, who you will probably remember. So I think it is 25 years ago, Penny.
God, I can't believe that. Is it really?
No, it is. And you will probably remember that I was a little bit dubious about this living leader lark, and thought that, frankly, I knew everything anyway, because I was a very successful businessman. And so what on earth was this little program going to teach me about anything? And I mean, it's vivid in my memory. I shall never forget the day one when I was looking like somebody had shot me through the forehead, as realization and recognition after recognition hammered home that actually everything that I'd been doing as a business person, as a would-be leader of teams of people, was actually terrible. I mean, I was about as, in the living leader speak, I was about as blue as you can get. So I should explain for those who don't know living leader and what it's about, what that means. It means I was pushing, I was telling, I was commanding and controlling. I was, from the goodness of my heart, because I knew all the answers, I was telling everybody what to do, morning, noon, and night. And of course, because they weren't quite good enough to do everything in the way that I really wanted it done, I would do it for them. And so I worked about 19 hours a day thinking, for God's sake, why am I doing this? I've got no home life. Work life is awful. I was miserable. And then, would you believe it? Engagement was low and attrition was high. The business was not performing. I mean, for God's sake, despite the brilliance that I was exuding on everybody, nothing was working. And I thought I didn't need to go on the Living Leader program. Goodness me. But it was after that first day, I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, I've got it all wrong. I've been doing it all wrongly. And it was an incredible revelation to me. And thank goodness it happened, because it enabled me to change tack thereafter and try and do a better job than I had been doing beforehand. So I'll draw breath there. So does that help, Penny?
Oh, absolutely fabulous. I mean, so interesting. If you can remember back then, you say it was a huge wake-up call. And let me, for people who are listening here, I'm sure they've all heard it before, let me say how we describe the difference between leadership management. Outstanding managers drive people to perform at the highest level they're capable of. It's very much about control. Outstanding leaders inspire them to do it for themselves, and it's more about freedom. So what you're describing is through caring for people, through caring for results. You'd never known it any differently. You were managing, believing that you were really going to be able to help people get to the best they can be. So when you actually came away from that program, what do you think are the actual behaviors that you said, these are the things that I need to change quite radically? What did you actually do differently as a result?
I think in my case, it was very largely around communication. I thought I was a good communicator. I thought I was brilliant, and I was good at telling stories, and I was a great raconteur and all the rest of it, all coming from my expressive personality. But it turned out that nobody had a clue what I was on about. They didn't know what I was asking for. So I was telling people what to do, and it was in such flowery language and such prosaic expressions that nobody had the faintest idea what I was on about, and kept on asking themselves, each other in the team, what did Paul want us to do there? What was that about? Does anybody have any idea? Could someone translate what he said? So I was unclear. I was living in my own head. I was inside out, right? Everything was in my brain. I was thinking of all sorts of ideas, and it would just splurt out of my mouth, and no one could follow what I was doing. So I had no discipline in my communication. Most important of all, though, I wasn't interested in anybody else. I didn't take into account anybody's views. I didn't ask for them. I wasn't interested. I just blanked them, or shut them out, or stopped them, or spoke over the top of them, or worse still, and I still do this, and I'm picked up by my family the whole time for it, finishing people's sentences. It's just an awful, awful, awful habit I have, which is, as we know, just completely unacceptable, but I do it. And I have to, at least I'm self-aware enough to know that I am doing it and try my best to stop. But it was communication. So I set about, and I actually use some of the expressions from the Living Leader communication module even today. So I make it clear when I am in that manager mode, when I'm in the command and control tell mode, when I'm saying, right, I'm going to put a proposal on the table, I'm going to give people some information, or I'm going to disagree with what I heard because X, Y, Z. But equally, I balance that with questions, seeking information from others, testing my understanding of what other people are saying. So I've actually understood exactly what it is their point is about. I summarize what people say. I do that a lot, particularly in my role these days as chairman. One of your biggest roles is to summarize discussion, not just at the end of the meeting, by the way, but as you go through the meeting, particularly with a complex topic, you want to summarize where the team has got to at each stage of the journey. And then, of course, there's all critical behaviors around supporting and then extending or building on what others have said. And then the other one, which I never, ever, ever, ever did, is this much underestimated drawing in behavior. So I'm sure there will be, I'm slightly going to a tangent, but it's an important tangent. There will be many people on this call, I'm sure, who spend their lives in meetings, right? And there will be the normal showboat chairman in the meeting who's, sounding great, whether he or she is great or not, doesn't matter. But we've all been in those meetings, and the leader is droning on and on and on, telling us how wonderful they are, or how many ideas they've got, or what information needs to be shared, and so on. And may even ask a few questions for the group. And of course, the other showboaters, who are the would-be, I'm going to take over from you, showboat individual, will voice up. But the quiet people very often don't. The analytical, reflective people, the people who are supportive in nature, whose personality styles are slightly more introverted, but they're thinking. They're the ones who are thinking. While the rest of us are showboating and expressing and saying how marvelous we are, they're the ones that are sitting back thinking, that's a bit odd. Isn't there another way we could do that? I think there probably is, actually. Well, how about this? But they never get asked for their opinion. Never. And so they go out of the meeting depressed and distressed and go off doing whatever they do. Now, you could say they should be confident enough to speak up. Of course you could. And that's about taking responsibility and making a stand. But, let's be real. Humans are humans. And if you're a quiet, introverted individual, you need to be encouraged to speak. And so that's the great power of drawing in, is to draw someone in to the conversation. And very often I find, goodness, probably 7 or 8 times out of 10, when I draw in the quiet people in a meeting, particularly on a difficult topic, they have the answer. And nobody else, all the showboaters who've been making a whole lot of noise for the previous 45 minutes have offered nothing of any moment at all. It's the quiet ones who've got the ideas. So I learned all this about communication. So I changed the way I communicate. I turned everything upside down. I asked my team for feedback about how I was, which was also a pretty invidious experience to go through, because they tore me to shreds once they got used to the idea that it was okay so to do. But I changed my behavior, and I work on it every living day, and I have done for 25 years.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. You're somebody who got such a passion for leadership once you got it, that you just kept moving forward and forward and forward. And the thing that was pretty darned unusual about you is that as a chief executive, you decided to go the next stage. And of course, the next stage is not a 3-day program, it's 10 days and then a 3-day pilot. What made you decide to do that? And why do you think it was important that you did?
I think there were probably 2 reasons. One was I was very taken by the program because it had done so much good for me. And I was very keen that it be shared across the rest of the business. And I felt the best way for people to realize that it was something that I thought was a really, really important initiative would be for me to teach it. Because then that would be setting the example. That would be showing people this is so important that I've taken 2 weeks out of my schedule to learn how to facilitate this very enlightening and liberating program. So that was one reason. I think the other reason was that I was acutely aware that the best way to learn something is really to teach it. And isn't that true, right? You just, until you've taught something, you haven't really embedded it in your brain. And so that was a bit of a selfish reason, to be honest. I knew that if I was going to get this properly and be the best leader I could be, then I needed to be able to teach it so that I would really embed the learning. So those were probably the 2 reasons. But I've spoken about this before, but for those on the call, in typical style, I swanned into the program thinking, oh, well, this will be easy because I know what I'm doing now. And of course, I got through the first day and I failed. I failed the first day. I couldn't believe it. What do you mean? What do you mean I failed? I'm paying for this. How can I have failed it? But of course, I'd failed it because I'd taken what is a really complicated set of modules for granted. I just thought, I'll wing it and be all right. And of course, it wasn't. And I was caught out. And of course, the 3 colleagues who were doing it with me, who were my HR director, customer service director, and my product marketing director, all women, all extremely capable, very, very good leaders in their own right. They thought this was hilarious and have never let me forget it. The fact that they passed and I failed. But it was a liberating 2 weeks because it really did embed the learning in me. And I found out all kinds of things that I'd missed in the programs, I should say, because I'd done it multiple times by then, that I'd experienced in the past. So no, it was really important to me personally, and I think it set the right example. It enabled the program to be rolled out across well over 1,000 people, I think, from recollection, through the Sage UK and Ireland business.
Yeah, it was. And I always remember, I can't remember if it was when you went into Zen, but I think you ran a program there at the very low levels. So
Hmm.
you didn't just say, oh, I'm important, I need to do it at the top. You did it at the very low levels, basically giving people permission to give
Yeah.
you feedback if you weren't walking the talk. And I think that is unusual and very exceptional. So the message is fascinating. One of the things that you haven't touched on at all is, although it could be implied, is you say you do your best to live at every moment of every day, but it's not just about the workplace, is it?
No, no,
So talk
no,
a little
no.
bit about the impact you think it actually has on life.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think every walk of life, whether it's your family, um, whether it's with friends, meeting groups of people that you used to work with or went to university with or whatever, any kind of grouping of people, the same principles apply. The same principles apply. If you're self-aware and understand your communication behaviors at a deep and profound level, you become a happier person, no question about it, and you make the people around you happier as well. So any team of people, whether they're at work or whether it's your family team at home or whether it's teams of people that you're out with socially, whatever, if the communication behaviors are right, everybody will get more out of it. If the communication behaviors are wrong, it can be just really irritating, frustrating, difficult, argumentative. So no, I think that the lessons apply well outside the workplace across every aspect of life. Now, it of course it's hard. It's difficult to remember everything all the time. I think one of the biggest questions I get asked is, how do you keep this going? How do you sustain it? Because you come out after 3 days of the program and you think, yeah, I've seen the light. But then trying to keep it going 6 months later in the middle of the winter when you're in your fourth board meeting on the trot is really hard. And that's why self-awareness is such a critical part of understanding. You're taking time out almost outside yourself to look at yourself and say, hang on a second, how are you behaving? What are you doing? What's going on? Take stock, reflect, think about what's going on. Are you listening to people? Are you really appreciating the environment you're in? Are you appreciating the people that surround you? Are you communicating in the right way? Are you asking intelligent, incisive questions? Or are you just blurting out stuff because you think it's the right thing to do? So I think all of those things are really important, both at work and at home. If you're trying to deal with family situation, which again, many people on the call will be, there's always stuff going on. There's good things and there's not so good things, always, all the time. And if you've got a big decision to make as a family on behalf of one of the family members or whatever, and the communication behaviors are in the wrong place, and you as the father think, well, for goodness sake, I'm in my 60s, I know the answer to everything, so here's my opinion, I'll tell you what to do. Or it's a disaster because it's just going to get rejected out of hand. I mean, it's ridiculous. You have to find more intelligent ways in which to suppose a situation and to ask, if you knew that such and such was actually not going to be the case, then how would you go about dealing with this particular issue? With the answer burning in your head, right? Desperate to get it out. But actually you have to control that and say, and let everyone else have their say, because what will happen more often than not is that someone will come up with an idea which is far superior to your own. So that idea that you had in your head that was bursting to get out, you actually think, oh, actually, that was a rubbish idea on reflection because I've heard something much better. And of course, you can translate that into the workplace. Those leaders that we've all worked for, who are manager mode through and through, who are tell, command and control, who have their ideas, push them onto the team, never get to hear about the better ideas that the team had all along. They never get to hear them. And so, of course, that team will always underperform. And I've seen this time and time and time again over the last 25 years. I really have. And those teams that are led by individuals who balance the ideas that they have with a genuine curiosity and interest in the ideas and proposals that others have are the teams that outperform every time.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I can still think it was really funny. As you know, I employ the most amazing guy, the lovely Adrian, who's now been with me for 12 years. And it was his daughter's 18th birthday last year, which I went to over in Romania. And Adrian, I was having to talk to him almost non-stop and saying, hang on, whose party is this? Whose party is this? Because he'd be saying, no, she needs to have a live band. No, it needs to be here. No, this is what the menu. No, this is what. Adrian, whose party is this? Adrian, whose party is this? Adrian, and on and on, because he wanted it to be perfect. He wanted it to be, but he thought he knew what was best. And it was on and on saying, and he said it was really funny because then when he did go back to Romania the week before, he was doing things with them, going to relook at the menu or relook at the whatever it was. And Claudia and Julia were sort of saying to each other, what's wrong with us? He's not, what's wrong with him? He's not telling us what to do. And he said he was just like this, making sure he didn't. And again, it's through caring, wanting it to be what you think is the best for your daughter. Yeah. And so he couldn't stop telling her. But we did have some really very funny conversations about it. Yeah. The amount of times I said to him, Adrian, whose party is this? Adrian, whose party is this? Yeah. All you're doing, sunshine, is paying the bill.
Exactly right.
It was really very, very funny. Paul, there's things that I've come across. I've sometimes talked to you about it in organizations. And as you know, I don't deliver programs now, but I used to deliver quite a lot, nearly always to senior teams. And what I found more common is that what you'd have a group of very bright individuals, all good in their own particular ways. So the marketing director might be amazing, and the HR director, and all the, different, all very good in their own way. But it was a group of individuals, not a team. Just wasn't a team. If you go into a situation like that, and I'm sure you've experienced it, both where you've joined a team and the boss doesn't know how to do it, or you've gone into a team and thought, God, I'm really going to have to turn this into a team. Tell me, how do you go about that? Because I think this is a very common problem.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I suppose I start off by sharing the monstrously obvious philosophy for business success, which is you need to get your people right first. And that, particularly if you're talking to an executive team or a senior leadership team, that of course is relevant to that team, but it's also relevant to people across the entire business. You need to get your people right first, because if your people are engaged and fired up and believe in what they're doing and really enjoying the work, then surprise, surprise, customers will feel a very different kind of experience from the kind of experience that they feel from others. And because customers feel a very different kind of experience, because people go the extra mile for customers and do the extra thing and smile and are genuine, authentic, whatever, because of that, customers tend to stay more loyal. They tend to buy more from you, and they tend to recommend you to others. And because of that, you get sustainable and superior business success, in my experience. But so often, senior leadership teams leap to the third and they think, right, we're in charge now. We've got a crisis. So let's hack costs to bits. Let's slash and burn. Let's restructure to hell and back. Now, sometimes you have to take cost out. Let's not duck that. And it may be that a cost base that you're inheriting as a senior leadership team is just completely out of sync with what's required. So I take that on board. However, if you are exclusively focused on cost out, you will at some stage lose your people. And if you lose your people, then the medium longer term has gone, because you'll get attrition going up, engagement will be low, no one will care, customers will get a rubbish experience. And before you know where you are, you start drifting down. So your cost base has been reduced, but then you have to have another hacking restructuring about a year later, because revenues are declining now, because customers are leaving you in their droves, because your people are hacked off. So what I always say is, I say, let us not forget, if we have to do some adjustment and amendment on the cost base, fine, but let's not lose sight of what we need to do to bring our people with us. And if it's a difficult cost-cutting program that you have to do for the safety and security of the business and its future, and involves redundancies or difficult decisions on people, don't duck that either. Embrace the people dimension in that discussion. Be bold and brave and courageous and explain it. People will respect you, no matter how difficult the decisions may be, if you take the people agenda into account. But so often senior leadership teams do not do that. And because they don't do that, they're surprised when teams of people through the rest of the organization, and each team has got its own leader and it's got its own function and whatever it does, and all at different hierarchies in the organization. But the senior leadership team is then surprised as to why are these teams not performing? For God's sake, we've taken the cost base out, we've addressed it, we've restructured, we've done it very well. I mean, the forecast said that the profitability should now be flowing, and it isn't. What's going on? Why isn't it working? And the answer is always because people are just not interested, disengaged, unclear, not confident, been left behind. And so what the senior leadership teams do, and you know this, Penny, as well as anybody, what the senior leadership team does, it says, right, this is not good enough. Teams in the business are not operating correctly. So what we need to do is to bring in a whole bucket load of consultants in order to tell us how to sort this place out, because it's clearly not right. And so you get endless streams of consultants coming through the doors, some of whom are great, many of whom are not really adding much value. But all the while, the issue that is the obvious issue is staring them in the face, which is that people are hacked off. And what frustrates me beyond all measure about this is that fixing the people stuff does not cost a lot of money. Consultants cost a lot of money. Restructurings cost a fortune, although they will get cost out as a consequence. But fixing the people agenda costs very little. Fixing the people agenda can be as simple as leaders at all levels in the organization, starting from the top, leading with that right balance of what you call manager mode and leader mode, that right balance of my ideas, but interested in yours. That element of encouraging people in the team to share each other's values, to, as I think I was saying earlier, to have each other's backs in a time of crisis, to have a shared confidence about the future, to communicate openly and intelligently with each other, to be clear about what their role is, to have a strong sense of understanding about where their career is going to go, even if it's an agent at the coalface, doesn't matter. What's the next level? You said earlier, actually, and I wanted to pick up on it, a really great point about the fact that living leader is relevant to all levels in the organization. I've found, I think it's a bit like politicians underestimating the electorate. You know, they think that most of the electorate is thick. Well, they're not. The electorate, generally speaking, get it right. And the same is true of people in the business. So the vast majority of people in the business at the coalface who have the interface with the customer, they know exactly what's going on. They know exactly what's going on, and they know exactly what's wrong with the company's offering vis-a-vis its customers, because they live it every day. And yet they're kind of not deemed to be leadership material. And this is total rubbish. Drives me crackers. I make it my job to talk to people at the coalface all the time, because I find that they've got the best ideas. It's a bit like talking to the quiet one in the meeting. You talk to people who are on the machines or in manufacturing or on the phones in a call center or whatever. They know what's going on. They have great ideas and great answers. And so having a group of those people in a living leader environment is enormously rewarding, because it's a tremendous gift to them. It opens up their views of what might be for them as individuals and for the teams with which they work. And I find that enormously rewarding. But if teams throughout the organization cascaded in that way, have got the right sort of empathetic leadership, which is encouraging all of these things, sharing of values and so on and so forth, then teams will perform. Now, all of what I've said costs actually virtually nothing. It's a choice. It's a choice. You can choose to be a pig and an idiot and command and control everybody to hell and back, or you can choose to be balanced and to ask questions and to bring people in and to have a much more interesting and fun-filled atmosphere. It's about choice. People say culture change programs take years. It'll take you 5 years, but you 5 years to change culture here. We don't do things like that. It's absolute palpable nonsense. You can change culture in a heartbeat. I mean, think of a team that we've been on, right? I'm sure everybody listening can think of a team where they've been on a team and it's been an absolute dog's breakfast. I mean, you're loath going into meetings. You just think, oh my God, I can't bear it. There's going to be another row. There's going to be a huge disagreement, which is going to get personalized. It's going to be the same old, and we're never going to talk about the thing that we really should be talking about because nobody's prepared to do it. Everyone ducks it, and you go in and you laboriously listen to endless PowerPoints from endless people around the table, and you come out and you're drained and exhausted. You've learned nothing. You've gained nothing. It's miserable. You change one or two people on that team because they've, I don't know, retired or resigned or been fired or chosen to move somewhere else, and 2 new people come in. So you've still got the bulk of the team the same. 2 new people come in, dynamic changes completely. And we've all been there. We've all seen that happen. And all of a sudden, new choices can be made. There's a new environment. People appreciate each other. People are listening. There's a bit more fun. There's a bit more smiling and sharing and recognition, and everybody else's strengths and vulnerabilities are shared and understood. And so as a team, you can move forward collectively with much greater momentum. I've seen it so often. And it works the other way around, of course. You can have a great team, which is brilliant, and you're going, saying, it's marvelous, I'm really enjoying it, it's wonderful. And just the team leader changes, and a new team leader comes in, it's hell on earth. And you're the same individual, right? But within 2 weeks, you've turned into this shell. You've disappeared inside yourself. Your head's in the sand, and you can't bear it because it's bloody miserable. The power of teams and the power of empathetic leadership to make teams special is incredible. And here's the truth, right? Here's the truth. And this is, anybody who doubts me, just look at the research because it's unequivocal. Any business is only successful if the teams in it are successful. And if the teams in it are not, the business will not succeed. Very straightforward. And it's not good enough for the C-suite to think of itself, aha, we're brilliant and we're great and our team is wonderful, if the rest of the organization is full of teams that are suboptimal or disinterested or disengaged, because nothing will work. Doesn't matter how good your strategy is, doesn't matter how wonderful your plan is, it'll never work. On the other hand, if you've got teams of people through that organization who are really up for it and fighting for each other and collaborating and helping and enjoying it and feel like they're cared for and that they're interested and they go to work with a skip in their step, you can do anything with an organization like that. You can do anything. Even if your strategy is rubbish, you'll still outperform everybody else because your people will be with you and you can take them to the promised land and it'll happen. It'll happen. And it is as simple as leadership. So it always strikes me, it's a very, very, very long answer to your question, Penny, but it always strikes me in times of crisis, or when you come into a new team, or when you get engaged in a new business, executives, senior leaders tend to focus on costs or the P&L or finances or back office, process, strategy planning. Actually, the first thing they should do is look at the people. People first. If you get your people first, everything else will follow.
I think it'd be really interesting because I remember it would be really interesting, and I think she'd be very happy for this to be shared. The amazing example that you could give, actually with facts and figures, is Total Fitness, Sophie Lawler.
Yeah. So Sophie will be hugely embarrassed now. I'm about to embarrass her publicly. But Sophie Lawler is chief executive of Total Fitness, as you say. And the reason she'd be mortified is because she would be the very first to say that it's nothing to do with her, it's everything to do with the team. But that kind of makes the point. That is the point. That is exactly why, even though she's a very charismatic, very charming and inspirational leader in her own right, genuinely and authentically, she puts down the success of the business, and it has been a tremendous success, and I'll come on to that in a second. She puts it down to the team. And then she goes on to say, and it's not just the senior team, it's because every team in the business shares the same values, the same approach, the same belief in the purpose of what we're about as a business. They have confidence in the future. They have all those things I was talking about earlier. And as a consequence, the teams fly. So, their employee net promoter score, I'm probably going to get this wrong, which is dangerous in a public video, but anyway, roughly, it was in negative territory. I can't remember quite where it was, -15 or -20 or something, before Sophie and her team came in. But post Living Leader and the sort of training and the change in thinking that Living Leader encourages, the employee net promoter score has gone from that negative, whatever it was, 15, 20, negative 15, 20 to +50, +58, something like that. It's just astounding. And the results, of course, are clear. I mean, customers, surprise, surprise, get a really great experience as a result of the fact that everybody in the business is inspired and loves it and is engaged, and it's great, and we're all in it together and all the rest of it. So customers feel a great experience. So guess what? Instead of canceling their subscription, they stay on longer. They're more loyal. They recommend Total Fitness to others. And so Total Fitness post-COVID, COVID was a terrible time for any fitness business, of course, but post-COVID, Total Fitness has enjoyed industry-beating statistics for new members and the lowest attrition rates and so on and so forth. And it's all because customers are happy, because customers are getting looked after, because they get a great experience. And of course, all of that flows through to wonderful financial performance. But it's all down. It starts with leadership.
So, Paul, I don't know if you can sort of remember too much of it, but you've taken leadership into different companies. Just so that people know, this isn't just, isn't it nice to be a great leader? What are the sort of results that you've generated from some of the different companies you've been in?
Well, so at Sage, when I was running the UK and Ireland division, we ran the Living Leader program, and the backdrop to this is that, and I suppose I can admit it now. I'm no longer there and haven't been there for a long time. But Sage is such an extraordinarily brilliant business that honestly, I think I could have gone on holiday for a year, and it still would have grown at 5%. I mean, I think it was just an amazing business model, wonderful marketing, great brand, terrific products, wonderful people with lots of enthusiasm. It just kept rolling on, but it kind of was stuck at 5 or 6%. We put the company through the Living Leader program, the vast majority, and nothing else really changed. I mean, sometimes in software land, if you get a big legislative change, then that can give you a slightly unrealistic uptick in revenue, but nothing like that happened. There was nothing major. The only thing that we'd done that was really different was to put this new way of thinking about people and how to look after them and lead them more effectively through the business, with all that means in terms of teams and team effectiveness and collaboration and so on. And the revenue growth went into double digit. It went to over 10%, which for a business that was already, 350 million pounds in revenue, that was a lot. that was a lot of additional revenue. Now, and people used to say to me, so where's the extra revenue come from? Where's the growth come from? And I used to say, look, I think it's been there all along. It's just we've never been able to tap into it because we've never got our people on side in the way that they are now. So engagement improved dramatically. The net promoter, the external net promoter score, the customer net promoter score went from, it was low, it was sort of in the teens, plus, I don't know, 15 to 20, something like that, went up to plus 50.
God.
And the financial performance just cruised on. So, you know, that was a very tangible example. And look, honestly, every business that I've been in since, the same sort of statistics have taken place. And I don't think you can't always pinpoint the financial overperformance back to leadership, because there may be something that happens in a particular year or set of years that offsets or has an impact on the financial performance. But what you're doing by getting leadership thinking into the business in a different way, right throughout the business, so people everywhere are talking, thinking differently, what you get is a powerhouse that is ready to explode with revenue growth and success. And you don't have to spend money to make it happen. It's latent. It's there. It's waiting for the right market conditions to be present so that they'll just say, right, let's go, and it'll happen. And that is such an exciting thing to have. Whereas most of the time, most of us in business are staring at the organization thinking, God, how are we going to crank it up now? You know, and so people fall into the trap of saying, right, I'll tell you what we'll do. In order to get people to go the extra mile, we'll pay them an extra bonus. We'll give them a bonus. That's what we'll do. So if we promise them a bonus, then they'll perform because, you know, money talks, right? And so bonus schemes are put in place and commissions and incentives and all kinds of other stuff. And they have a role, they have a place, but they're not a fix. They're a short-term adjuster of performance, but they will not make you able to succeed. What makes you succeed is getting your people engaged, is getting your people believing. And that doesn't cost you anything. That costs you leadership, costs you time and effort, but it doesn't cost you money. It costs you it costs you your time and effort to make a positive choice to bring your people with you.
Yeah, tell me, I'm quite curious on something else, Paul. You know, nearly always we get people are interested in bringing us in when there's a problem. When do you think is the best time to bring leadership into a company? Because I did speak to somebody not that long ago who thought they were so successful and making so much money, they absolutely didn't need leadership. You know, they didn't need any more training. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, I think that's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous path. Pride comes before a fall and all that. No, I think when things are going swimmingly well, is actually one of the best times to make sure that your investment and your thinking in your people is where it ought to be. It's absolutely not just for a time of crisis. Because actually, ironically, in a time of crisis, very often what is required is actually more of that manager mode than the leader mode, right? I mean, because in a time of crisis, your people need to have the guidance as to what's going to go on. I mean, if we've got a pandemic has just emerged and we've all got to be working at home in 10 days, there's no point in saying to everybody in the business, well, how very interesting. We have a major challenge here. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas on where we ought to go and what sort of timeframes and project planning and milestones? I mean, no, you got to say, right, we're going to do this. We're going to do A by such and such a day and B by such and such a day and so on. And of course, we all did that. We leapt to it and we took the whole of the British workplace home within 10 days. It was just the most remarkable thing. And that required manager mode. That required, crisis management. So when a team is in crisis and thinks, blimey, we're in crisis, let's go do some leadership development. I mean, that's kind of mad, because it's not going to help you. The right time to go, I think, well, I don't think there is a right time, actually. I think every team can benefit, even if it's a brilliant team. Every team can benefit from investment in itself, to really explore and examine whether it is behaving in the right way, whether it is communicating in the right way, what example it's setting. Have we fallen into bad habits? What can we individually learn? What can we collectively do to make us a better team? It's always worth doing.
Yeah, it was something I remember when I had one of these conversations with the person that we all know and love, the lovely Chris Weston. And he said something that I thought, God, that's going to scare the shit out of a lot of people. He said, the problem is when you're a chief executive and you want to have these behaviors and you really need to bring leadership in, you can't afford to slip ever. Ever. You need to do it every minute of every day. You only have to get it wrong once and people will remember. And I thought, gosh, that's going to scare some people, because you can't afford to, can you?
No, you can't. And it is a huge lesson for anybody who makes it to the top table, and certainly for anybody who makes it to chief executive. Everyone is watching you all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And your behavior, and I wouldn't just say your verbal communication either, your body language, the pace with which you walk, the way you smile or scowl, I mean, it's everyone picks it up. I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, if you're a chief executive, so when I was a chief executive at Tunstall, a medtech manufacturer in Yorkshire, I remember going around the factory thinking no one will notice me. I'm just going to have a quick walk around in my white coat and my hat, just to make sure that I understand where everything is. And I said hello to a few people, and then I went away again, assuming that nobody noticed. Oh my God. I mean, they all noticed. Well, they all noticed. They watched every single move. You cannot rest for a minute. You have to be disciplined and full of the awareness that comes with understanding that responsibility. And if you let your guard drop, if you get hacked off or scowl or disagree forcibly with somebody, or just because you've had a bad day and everything's got on top of you, unfortunately it'll be picked up by loads of people, and then people will stop believing. They will think, there you go, you see. So people don't care, do they? Really? They don't. It's not the same. This is all guff. So it is incredibly hard. You have to have a consistency. And if you do make a mistake, you acknowledge it. You absolutely acknowledge it. You come out and you say, my behavior back then, I mean, I may be chief executive, but that was appalling. I'm so sorry. That was awful. It was grotesque. I shouldn't have done it. And I apologize to all of you. And you have to do that. And I've done it a lot, because, we all make mistakes. We're human beings, and people don't mind if you do that. No. It makes you more authentic. They will forgive you.
What do you do? And I know you've had this as an experience, but I think it's useful for other people to hear. When you have a team and you are living and breathing the leadership culture, and that's what you've made very clear throughout your organization, and you've got one person on the team who's highly successful financially, so they're bringing in the results, but doing it absolutely in the opposite style to the culture that you're doing your damnedest to have in the company. What do you do?
You try to get them on side in a very direct way, because you just have to lay it out that their behavior is unacceptable and it's not going to work if their behavior doesn't change. And you give them a certain amount of time to perform. But if that doesn't change, notwithstanding the fact they are a great success, you have to move them on, because no one is irreplaceable. No one. And the team is more important than any individual in it. in my view. And goodness, I've had that situation that you've described many, many times. I mean, we all have many times in the past. And of course, I prevaricated and thought, well, maybe they'll come round. And, it's a new year coming up in January. They'll wake up and they'll be a different person altogether. It'll be marvelous. Of course, it never does. Never does. Leopards and spots. People. It's rare that people change. Some people do, but it's rare. It's rare that people do. But if you take too long to get rid of a bad apple that's in your team, then you will be doing untold damage to the rest of the team, and you run the risk of losing the team ethos and team culture altogether. On the other hand, what's amazing to me is the sense of liberation and euphoria that happens in the team when you do get rid of a bad apple and you explain to everybody saying, look, I'm terribly sorry. The most successful member of the team, I've had to move on because they were not a team player and they couldn't behave in the right way and the communication was off. And everybody goes, yeah, fantastic. That's brilliant. Good on you, boss. And you think, oh, it's a bit of a surprise. And of course, they make up for any shortfall that might have been caused by the one that's gone. So no, I have learnt that if your inner voice tells you something's not right, have a go first at fixing it and give it your all, but not for too long. Yeah. Because if it's not going to change, get rid.
It's not an easy one. And the sad thing is that quite often the person that you then have to remove doesn't ever fully understand it.
Nope.
Because they're so focused on getting the figures and they think, I can't understand why there's a problem. Now, I know we've only got a few minutes left, but there's one thing that I know that for you had a profound impact and you believe in. Now, I think we refer to it as appreciation, but focusing on people's strengths and telling them is something that you took on board big time. Just talk for a couple of minutes about that, and what difference you think that can make.
You're right. I was absolutely blown away by the power of appreciation and the fact that I realized that I was very appreciative. But for the whole of my career, I had been making the appreciation in my head. Well, what use is that? So I was really chuffed and pleased and delighted with everything that my team and team members were doing. But I said it in my head. I never said it to them. And that was a horrifying realization. But when I started to practice it, I learned two things. One, I learned it was joyous for me. What a wonderful thing to do. What a wonderful thing to give people appreciation that makes them feel great. I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, that's a joyous thing. And the second thing I learned was that if you can make your appreciation more about the individual and who they are, and not about the job and what they do, then you can potentially transform people with 20 seconds of speech. It's remarkable. So if I say to you, Penny, what a marvelous podcast this has been. Thank you very much. You've done a great job. Thank you. That's one thing. But if I say, Penny, I have to say, your resilience, and nobody on this call knows this, but I know that you are struggling with all kinds of recovery from various stuff that you've had going on in your life. I mean, your energy and your power and your passion for this subject, despite all of that, is extraordinary. Which do you prefer, ladies and gentlemen? I mean, pretty obviously, it's the second one. Well, I hope it was.
Yeah, no question.
And how long did it take me? 10 seconds, 15 seconds extra? Cost nothing.
Yeah.
And if we could replicate that in the business environment, day in, day out, every single one of us in a 500-person company, 500 people, appreciating 3 people a day in that way, 20 seconds each, that's 1 minute of their day for each of those 500 people. That business would be flying simply from appreciation. It's extraordinary. It's the greatest gift.
And you do it. Oh my God, you do it. And seeing the success you've had in so many companies. I mean, I know you intend to continue the life that you're living, which is giving a lot of time to your family now, and also sharing all these amazing companies that you're doing. But I know that if you decide to take another job, there would be an army of people emailing you saying, do you need me to come and join you? Because I'm here. I absolutely know that you would get so many people saying, I want to come back and work for you again. They'd follow you to the ends of the earth.
Very kind of you, Penny.
So I think,
that boat has sailed.
yes, I know. Paul, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, not just for this, but you need to know that my life is the richer for having you in it. You're the most special guy. And the fact that I have been working with you and learning from you over the last years, for me, has been, I just feel the luckiest person imaginable. The fact that you're now a friend as well as everything means more to me. Truly, I feel a very rich person having you in my life. Thank you. Thank you,
Well,
Paul.
thank you, Penny. Really appreciate it.